This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com. Putting the finishing touches on your fall wardrobe? Luckily, there's still time to get great deals at Macy's VIP Fall Fashion Preview Sale. Shop now through October 5th for 30% off the best clothing, shoe, and accessory brands, plus 15% off beauty. Since it's layer season, grab a few cozy sweaters from French Connection and Karl Lagerfeld. And don't forget to stock up on skincare essentials from brands like Clinique for the cooler temps ahead. Shop at Macy's.com or in-store.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. And this is our series we call Some Sunday Context. On Sundays, we try and bring you new conversations and stories from the archives that might provide a little context for the news of today. The big news of today, as you no doubt know, is that the U.S. government is in a shutdown. I guess I should say as of this recording, but I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And we've done a few episodes about shutdowns on this show, so it might be instructive to listen back to some of them. We're going to run a couple of them over the coming week. Today, we go all the way back to the very first shutdown in the wake of the Civil War. Like a lot of people, I've been thinking about this most recent shutdown and what it is really about. Of course, there's the pain it will inflict on people who need government services or want to visit a national park, say, and of course the many government employees who aren't going to be getting paychecks. But this is a lot more than just a funding fight. In many ways, Democrats these days are seeing this as their most tangible chance to take a stand against the efforts of the Trump administration to dismantle government. So it is budgetary, it is political, and frankly, it is moral. And it turns out the very first government shutdown included a lot of those elements as well. It wasn't just about items on a spending bill. It wrapped in the huge questions and divisions of the Reconstruction era and political realignment of that moment. So we have had shutdowns with this kind of larger battle swirling around them before. Now, I don't know how reassuring it is to point that out, given that the parallels I'm seeing are to the era after the Civil War and the rolling back of Reconstruction, but anyway, it is a fascinating story, and it does offer a little bit of context. So here it is now. We recorded this a couple years ago. Take a listen. Hello, and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, March 1879, it's America's first government shutdown.
Woo!
There you go. Celebrate it, everyone. This is 1879, of course, in the wake of the Civil War, and many of the divisions that may not have been resolved on the battlefield were kind of now playing out in Congress. Specifically, there was this question of funding for the government, which was being held hostage by a small but committed group of representatives. In this case, former Confederate generals, now elected as Democrats representing southern states. So let's talk about the first government shutdown brinksmanship in our nation's history, how it mirrors the showdowns that we continue to see today, and then in its own moment, how it kind of realigned a lot of those Reconstruction era politics in the wake of the Civil War. Because in the end, I think this move did kind of backfire in a way on Southern Democrats and reshift some lines. So here to discuss, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So do you know when you have a broken bone or something, and then you just notice that everyone else seems like they have a cast too? Like when something's happening to you, I don't know why I'm saying this, but I'm saying this because I feel like you don't think that, like you don't think like you.
Maybe if I get a new car and I start to
see that car everywhere.
The car,
yes.
yeah.
Please at least accept my premise because it doesn't get much better after this. My point is. I think I'm having that with Rutherford B. Hayes, where I feel like we didn't talk about him at all on this podcast, and now I feel like all we do is talk about Rutherford B. Hayes on this podcast. And that might be true, or it might just be that I'm like, psyching myself up to just see Hayes everywhere. But this,
there's something to that. There's something to that.
So he is here. He is the president. He's a big part of this story, and let's actually start with him because we've often painted Rutherford B. Hayes as, he's a Republican, which in this period we should note, the Democrats are from the South, pro-slavery, the Republicans are the Northern Party. He is from Ohio. We've painted him largely as sympathetic to Southern Democrats and not a real big booster of Reconstruction. But it is interesting in this moment that we have him as a Republican from Ohio, but both houses of Congress are controlled by Democrats. So just like what's going on here, not this long after the Civil War, where the Democrats, who ostensibly lost the war, are now in control of both houses of Congress and seemingly in the driver's seat here, politically at least.
Well, I think it's worth going back to our last Hayes episode in this year of Rutherford B. Hayes, because we talked about the corrupt bargain that was made to make Hayes president, that the presidential election was functionally tied in the Electoral College. And so there was a deal made, which is that essentially the Republicans will draw Reconstruction in the South to an end, and they will get the presidency. But they didn't get Congress. Congress ends up going to the Democrats. And so the Democrats have power to kind of push to see how far this bargain is actually going to go. And that's when they start experimenting, as we'll talk about today, in order to see how much they can push Hayes around.
Yeah. And because Congress controls the purse strings, they can pretty much create legislation that will benefit them or hold certain dollars hostage in order to negotiate or manipulate outcomes that favor their agenda. And that's exactly what you see. You see the small group, I'll say, of the Democratic Party that is trying to use funds, withhold funds, in order to meet their political goals.
Well, so on that question, right, I think sometimes when you look at government shutdowns and these moments of brinksmanship, and, I think the debt ceiling debate is often about this too. There are moments where it's like, people who believe government should be smaller and that we should be spending less money or we shouldn't be funding certain things are holding out because it's a budget fight and they're fighting on that front. And they're holding up a sort of appropriations bill that. And then there's other ones where we're using this appropriations bill, we're using this funding fight to actually fight a battle about some other policy or agenda. So I think people probably know, given the intro and the time we're living in here, but Kelly, what is this fight really about? I don't think it's about line items on a budget, right?
All of the 19th century just goes back to Black people. All of it. At its core, a lot of these political, economic, and even to some extent social issues go back to race, white supremacy, anti-Blackness. And the Democrats' major gripe is that they want troops out the South. They want to be able to prevent African American men from voting because they know that they traditionally vote as a bloc and that bloc always votes Republican. And so if they can get troops out of the South, then they can pretty much hold elections and use whatever kind of intimidation that they want to keep Black people from coming to the polls and to keep Black people from voting against their interests. So, really, this all comes down to how can we marginalize Black voters so that we can get what we want, which is eventually a Democratic president in the White House again.
And to kind of add some context here, we talked about how the corrupt bargain was about taking that permanent federal military presence out of the South. But when it came to elections and enforcing elections, they wanted to have federal marshals and different people who were around to enforce the 15th Amendment, right? They had maybe given up on the 14th Amendment, which was to guarantee equal citizenship. But around election time, there was a reason to have extra monitoring of the polls. And that was what Democrats were pushing back again because they saw it as an opportunity to press their advantage, right? If we can get the federal troops out of the South, we are going to solidify Democratic control over these states after Reconstruction. And this is our chance to do it because we have these majorities in Congress. So let's do what we can to make this a permanent majority.
And the Democrats had not really had power within the presidency since 1856. So it's about a over 20-year stretch in which Democrats, the power that they really want, which is the top seat, they can't seem to secure. And so if they can somehow get these Black votes out of the way, or use this as a bargaining chip, use the budget as a bargaining chip, then maybe they can get what they want.
And so when you say bargaining chip, I mean, the actual tactical approach here, the strategy is that starting in early 1879, as the congressional session is wrapping up, the House Democratic majority starts to attach these riders to funding bills that prohibit the use of federal troops from monitoring polling sites, as we've been saying. That is a tried and true method, right, to attach sort of totally unrelated stuff to bills that need to get passed to keep things running on time. But it sets up this showdown with Hayes, who refuses to sign these bills. And so then we get to this day in this window that we're looking at right here in March, where Congress is adjourning and they are at risk of running out of money for later that summer. Any thoughts on the fundings itself, provisions, or the riders itself? And then I want to talk a little bit about Hayes's reaction, which I think is interesting.
So riders on appropriation bills, that wasn't a novelty in this moment, but the threat of an actual government shutdown was. And in part, this is because the laws around budgets had changed fairly recently. So in 1870, there was something called the Anti-Deficiency Act that was passed, and it meant that government departments couldn't spend any more money than what had been appropriated to them. So once they ran out of money, they were out of money. They couldn't dip into the coffers, they couldn't borrow money, they couldn't borrow against next year's appropriations. And that is what sets up the showdown, because now you are going to have government agencies that don't have access to money, and there's this new law that says when you're done, you're done. And so that really ratchets up the stakes when it comes to this potential government shutdown. I think the other thing worth pointing out about what's different about this moment is Congress kind of it's still a small country, or it's still a big country, and transportation is slow. So Congress kind of takes off in March and doesn't come back for a long time. And so in order to resolve this showdown, Hayes has to call a special session to get everybody to come back to do their work.
See, that wrinkle doesn't strike me as different at all. That actually strikes me as one of the most resonant things, that basically this is all about representatives wanting to go on vacation. And how many times have we seen big legislation play out where you really this person has a wedding to attend this weekend. That's what's really going on.
Guys, we're about to go on break. Hurry up.
Their vacations are just much longer in this period because it's you can't just hop on the flight and go back and forth.
Right.
I mean, they adjourned for 75 days or something like that. I'm like, that's a long time to not be in session. So it's definitely different politics. But you get to see, I think, how much, that timeline or that time crunch comes into play, because, people need to make these changes before all hell breaks loose, before the coffers run dry, before everything. I mean, this is a really intense moment politically speaking, because people are not just worried about the money running out, but how they're going to get paid, how they're going to survive.
This day is brought to you by Uncommon Goods. Uncommon Goods makes holiday shopping stress-free and joyful with thousands of one-of-a-kind gifts that you can't find anywhere else. And the holidays, you know what? Are they here? Are they really here? Well, they certainly will be before you know it. So now is the time to head over to Uncommon Goods and snag a few things now before you get super stressed. That's what I did recently, where I found an at-home escape room kit for kids. You can create your own escape room adventure right at home. And that's one Christmas present for my daughter taken care of, checked off the list. The real issue is whether I have the willpower to put it in the closet and not break it out for the next couple months, because I'm very excited about that home escape room. Uncommon Goods has something for everyone, from moms and dads to kids and teens, book lovers, history buffs, diehard football fans to foodies, gardeners. You will find thousands of new gift ideas that you won't find anywhere else. So shop early, have fun, and cross some names off your list today. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/thisday. That's uncommongoods.com/thisday for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. Fall is here, and with it comes cooler nights, heartier meals, and the craving for something warm and satisfying, which is where HelloFresh comes in, bringing you comforting, chef-designed recipes and fresh seasonal ingredients right to your door. I will tell you one thing about comfort cooking in the fall. I love it, but it can be really time and labor intensive. Lots of time in the oven, soups, baking. Sometimes I want to be able to make something quick and delicious and hearty on a weeknight. And that's where HelloFresh is stepping up. They recently doubled their number of recipes, their biggest menu refresh ever, and I've been exploring a lot of the options, including the pescatarian options. HelloFresh is helping me eat more fish. The other night, I made some herby salmon with red pepper cream sauce, and it comes with couscous, and you roast up some zucchini and onions. It took just about half an hour for it all to come together, totally doable on a weeknight, but also satisfying to cook it with your hands rather than ordering food or making something out of the freezer. The best way to cook just got better. Go to hellofresh.com/thisday10fm. You'll get 10 free meals and a free item for life, 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Once again, that's hellofresh.com/thisday10fm. You'll get 10 free meals and a free item for life. It is interesting, though, and we see this at times, too. You know, there was, from a purely political standpoint, I think a misstep on the part of Democrats in that some of the riders they attached were to, like, army funding, you know? And you see this sometimes, too. It's like, oh, you've picked the wrong wedge thing, you know, to fight. And I think that did prevail here, that it's like, well, you know, funding the military is still important to everyone. And, you know, do you really want to be on the wrong side of that question? I think ultimately that is part of what applies the pressure. But before we talk about that 75-day gap and then what happens when they come back and ultimately I think Democrats do cave, you know, I mean, I get it that Hayes is a Republican. It's Democrats who are pulling this move. But what they are asking for, isn't it stuff that Hayes has kind of largely already done? I mean, they're saying, oh, we don't want federal troops all up in our business. We want the South to kind of regain some autonomy here. I mean, that was Hayes' whole thing from the jump, or at least in the way that I understand it. So, like, what's this fight actually about? Why is he actually sort of pushing back against their demands?
I think because it's elections.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, okay, Black people are going to be second-class citizens in the South. We're not going to protect their rights. We're not going to protect their safety. But they're voters for the Republican Party, and we are not going to just cede elections in perpetuity. They kind of do end up ceding elections in perpetuity, but Hayes in this moment is saying, come on, like, we're not going to let this happen. And I think it was also about, like, that showdown between Hayes in Congress or Hayes in the Democratic Party, which is like, yes, I capitulated to you to get this spot, but you're not going to push me around on everything.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, part of the corrupt bargain, the 1876 corrupt bargain, is like, we want federal troops removed out of the South. That doesn't happen all at once. In certain states, they're gone. In certain states, it takes longer for them to leave. But by the time you're getting to the end of the 1870s, certainly the 1880s, federal troops are all but gone. And that sort of completes the process of what Democrats wanted, to just, how can we get rid of the Black vote? How can we get rid of any vote that's going to be in opposition to what we want?
Yeah. I also think, just to skip ahead a little to the legacy of this, the political fight, you know, within Washington that's being fought here, I think is one of the big legacies, because this is, I think, a moment where it's seen as establishing a kind of precedent that, like, the executive can push back. The executive doesn't have to just sign everything. And so I think Hayes is taking a stand there, too, for his branch of government as much as anything.
Yeah, he vetoes it. I mean, he vetoes it 5 times.
Yeah.
He vetoes their bills, not once, not twice. Like, and he's trying to send a real message, like, until you send me something I can work with, I'm not going to sign off on this.
Yeah.
I also think there's a story here about brinksmanship and also, like, the innovations in Congress from out parties trying to figure out ways to push norms to their limits and see kind of what the political system and the popular appetite will tolerate. And what I actually find super interesting about this particular moment is that even Democrats are writing in and they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is bad. This is not what you're supposed to be doing. This idea that it was extortion extortion. I think that really resonated with people. And there was a broad popular pushback against this. It's like, this is a bridge too far. We don't want you playing, chicken with the federal budget.
Yeah. And this is also a small group of people that are trying to push these ideas.
Right.
Not all Democrats are on board, but you do have sort of this holdover of Confederate generals that are elected officials that are trying to, push these ideas, but they don't represent the whole. Now, I shouldn't say it like the whole is actually progressive,
right.
but I mean that in a way that you have an extreme or radical fringe that is driving, in some sense, the party.
That's so unusual. I don't relate to that at all.
Heard of that.
That dynamic is certainly there now, as is the kind of backlash. I think you're right. Like, they touched the hot stove a little bit here. I think that 75-day gap probably doesn't work in their favor, right? It's just like gives this pause where Americans look and say, hey, wait a minute, what's really going on here? They have some time to mull on it. Bankers are not happy with this. They're basically like, you're crashing the economy as we're trying to recover from the wake of the Civil War. And like political cartoons are having a field day with this. Some of the cartoons of the time, if you go look them up, they're actually, most cartoons from this era, I'm like, I do not get that at all. And that's not fun. Some of these are actually kind of clever, but a lot of them do sort of lampoon that idea that like, look, we already fought the Civil War, right? This feels like it's just, and clearly these are ex-Confederate generals. Like, they still want to be fighting the Civil War. But, there's a little bit of a sense of that. Like, this feels too much like what we just put our country through. We have to move forward.
This is kind of a side note, and maybe we can follow it up on a future episode. But, all of this talk of Confederate generals and Confederate soldiers, our researcher Jacob noted that 129 of the 192 Democrats in Congress were former soldiers in the Confederate Army. That's remarkable. Yeah. That's like 2/3 maybe. And that idea that people who were in all-out rebellion against the U.S. government are now members of Congress. Again,
elected officials. Yeah.
Resonates in some ways, but also like that's a little surprising.
It's 79, y'all. I'm not good at math. What is it, like 10, 12, 13 years since
14 years.
14 years since the Civil War. I mean, the Civil War is still very much, a part of everyone's psyche. And it's not like one of this one generation removed where it's like, oh, my father fought. It's like, no, I fought in that war.
Right. Against that guy who's sitting right across the aisle from me. I feel like maybe they didn't wave the bloody shirt enough. That's the problem with 19th century politics.
So as we should say, they come back. Eventually, Democrats do cave. They're able to withhold, a few $100,000 out of a set of several $1 million budget, but it's largely seen as Hayes holds fast. These riders are removed. They keep the government open. Interestingly enough, you'd think this was a good moment for Hayes, but the real winner here seems to be a congressman by the name of James A. Garfield, who is also a Republican. He seemed to kind of really take up the mantle of decrying what the Democrats were up to, and this does seem to be the sort of origin story of him then launching his more high-profile political career, and eventually, obviously Garfield becomes president. I mean, he called this a revolution. He said the Democrats are trying to enact another revolution. I mean, he was really strident in his language here.
Well, and I think maybe this speech that he gives in which he talks about this as revolution may be worth revisiting today.
Yeah.
It feels, again, pretty strong statement about what procedural revolution looks like. And I think that's worth revisiting.
Yeah.
And given the statistic you just mentioned, Nikki, about like 129 soldiers having fought for the Confederacy, I mean, this is not a stretch to think that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will leave it there. Super fascinating moment and interesting precedent. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kelly Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Avirgan. See you soon.
Radiotopia.